come to you not live, but with an emergency message. Pressmeyer, Alan Thomas. It is the evening of Friday, June 27th, and Louisville basketball officially has Aly Khalifa on its roster.
What?
He was cleared by the NCAA, and we had to get on here and talk to you guys about it really fast before we get to our regularly scheduled programming. Alan Thomas, man, what a way to end your week with some great news about Aly Khalifa. Just initial thoughts on what it means to get a player like this back.
Yeah, not so much the Friday dump that we're used to. We're used to small news going out, and then you kind of, after everybody goes off air. This is major. We just touched on Aly. You and I did on the last episode that you and I recorded together.
Mm-hmm.
But we were just speculating as to how long this thing might take. We didn't know that a few days later we would get, the best news. And one thing about all this is we keep getting good news, and I'm trying to just knock on wood every time I hear something. In all facets of Louisville athletics right now, we're just continue to get a wave of good news. And so I'm just very thankful that all that's going according to plan. And this is a lot earlier, like I was saying, than we expected this news. But with Aly Khalifa coming back, so many different looks now. And now that it's official, it's almost like a chip in my brain has started to formulate all these lineups that include Aly Khalifa. It's like I can finally like that part of my brain has been released, and I'm like I can actually think about this, and like we're gonna see this. It's no longer, the paranoia is gone. We don't have to think about maybes anymore. I think my biggest thing is, can you imagine athletic an athletic big, an athletic point guard? That's fine. Lots of teams have them. We're gonna play a lot of good athletic bigs and athletic point guards, but can you imagine a pick and roll, pick and pop situation that features Michael Brown Jr. and Aly Khalifa? Or, I think it's a nightmare for a defender. Even Kobe Rogers, they've had lots of reps on film, on tape of those two getting reps together. They've been very close in the offseason. Even we learned yesterday that the SB Nation has Adrian Woolley projected at 22nd in next year's draft. Now, I mean, who knows, if we're going to hold a candle to that. But that kind of jumped off the page at me. Like, this is a guy that could, potentially run the one, and he has some nice ball handling skills. I love his mechanics, but I think the matchups are so exciting to think about, and just the different looks that we can give, because Aly Khalifa is such an incredible distributor and a great shooter. Mind you, this guy on his career averages 1 made three per game, at least, like 1 made three and 4 assists per game. Right. And he's 6'11". Yeah. Incredible. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, he is. I think Aly of the past is different than what the Aly Louisville is going to see.
I agree. This
year, and that might sound hyperbolic or like a potentially an outlandish statement, but I think that is what the reality is going to be for Louisville basketball fans, because you have a guy that has a gift that not many other players have, and his passing ability. And yeah, people will see the stat lines, right? Like the haters, the Kentucky fans, namely, love to come out of the woodwork and say stuff like, oh, well, I mean, the season's hinging on a 5.4 points per game scorer from 2 years ago that is coming back with a bad knee. Like, Here's the reality. There's only one player that's coming in or returning for Kentucky next year that averaged more assists per game last season, and that's their point guard, Jalen Lowe. That's all you really need to know, right? More assists per game, Aly Khalifa, than every other player on Kentucky's roster this coming year, than their point guard, and just by a little bit. So I think that's really all you need to know, right? Is that he's a guy that can bring something to the table that most other players in the country can't. And then I think it adds this depth and versatility to Louisville's front court that you wouldn't otherwise have, right? Sonata Frew, everybody knows I'm very high on him. I think that he is potentially one of the better players on this team. And then obviously the addition, or I guess the re-addition of Cason Pryor, and then now Aly Khalifa. I think that's a really good triumvirate of a front court. I think that's a versatile front court where you can completely spread teams out, right? You can go 5 wide with at least 2 of those guys.
Yeah.
in your lineup, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that what Aly Khalifa is going to provide this season after a year of rest and recovery, and then losing a crap ton of weight, and then going through the battle that he went through of recovering, and then being told that he wasn't allowed to play, and then having to wait over 2 months for a decision. I mean, that's got to be grueling, waiting for the NCAA to decide the fate of your career. I mean, there's, I mean, now that this is, I mean, players are paid, there's money on the line. Mm-hmm. There is, your life as you know it is on the line. He came over to the U.S. from Egypt to play basketball. Yeah. He has been all over the country playing basketball and took a risk to go to U of L because they wanted to let him do things his way. They were going to let him approach it differently. And then he went through all of the work to get back to where he is, only to be told that he couldn't play. Now that you've unleashed that, now that you've unleashed the beast, and now that you're getting this final form of Aly Khalifa, exciting things could be in the store, right? So
absolutely.
That's why I say that this version of Aly Khalifa is going to be different than what you had 2 seasons ago. So, no, I mean, exciting news. We had heard, I'd heard some murmurings from different, outlets essentially, but until you know officially, you don't know, right?
Right. Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about really quickly was just the moment when Pat Kelsey told not only Aly Khalifa but the rest of the team. I'd be interested in knowing who was aware, how much of a secret that they kept that for the hour that they knew, and then to have a former teammate in Rain Smith there as well, to have, all of the staff, what a really special moment. And I think the other thing too that video highlights is Pat Kelsey talking about, just how much he's been through. I know first world problems, right? Like, oh, you can't play basketball, boo-hoo, right? But I mean, the reality is this is something that he's worked. This is something that he's worked so hard for, and he's been a leader for this team. He's taken a back seat to everybody else for so long, and now gets an opportunity for it to be his time. But just any additional thoughts on just the emotion of the moment of telling him.
Yeah, I actually saw because somebody had quote tweeted, and it's somebody that I follow. And so I was like, what? But their initial reaction was like, woohoo, or whatever, like they were like, yeah, like L's up. And I'm like, no way. So I click on it, and like, I of course I knew going in, but I'm like, I'm kind of like you, like if to be a fly on the wall or whatever they say, in that room, like I wondered who knew. And again, you saw Rain Smith in there, and like, just really special that not just Rain, but like, it looks like, some new players. I think somebody pointed out like Woolley was in there, and probably the whole squad, all the coaches. Right. And it kind of highlights the 25 strong thing. We're like, yeah, we didn't realize like this guy. And I heard some, of course I've listened to a lot of radio in the past 2 hours, but I heard some guys talking about it, like Ennis and things like that, about, he already knows like the program, not just the plays and stuff like that, but he knows everybody, all the coaches. He's tight with everybody. This isn't like a new player. And sometimes like I have to remind myself that players that are injured, whether it's Case and Pryor or Aly Khalifa, if they're injured or if they're ineligible, whatever, they're still around all of that all the time. And they're still, constantly gelling together. Yeah. Even, and behind closed doors, and we never see it. Kobe Rogers too, same can be said for him. So yeah, what a special guy Pat Kelsey is for. It reminded me of a walk-on getting called up in football, like when they do those videos, they call up walk-ons.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what it reminded me of. But this one means, I'm not going to say it means more, but it means something a little bit different when you're talking about a guy that just like could not catch a break, and it had nothing to do with things that he wasn't doing. Obviously, like he got in shape. So, really special. And gosh, we're in such good hands here, man. From across the board, but especially with Pat Kelsey and all those guys in there. I love it.
It's a special time to be a Louisville fan. And I mean, look, all of us deserve this 100%. It is 100% absolutely deserved. Uh-huh. I will say, I'll leave everyone with this thought, and then we'll get into the actual show here. There have been some really impactful sit-out transfers, and that's been lost in the wake of NIL and unlimited transfers, right? There have been some really impactful guys that made the decision to transfer knowing that they would have to sit out. And obviously the two most impactful that come directly to mind for everybody are Luke Hancock and David Padgett, right? Uh-huh. Guys that it just didn't work out. Not that it didn't work out for Luke Hancock. I think he more moved into a Power 5 role opportunity and saw that something special could happen, right? But those ended up being two special players because and there's something to be said about waiting your turn. There's something to be said about that's been lost in college sports over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
That if it's just not the right fit for you, or you're looking for the next level of opportunity for you, that you're going to have to wait your turn. You're not just going to get to go to the next school and start there, or go to the next school. And then you have to sit through all of that. You have to sit through the entire season of your team's ups and downs. And for a player like Aly Khalifa, he did it while hurt. He did it where he had to become a leader in a different way besides what he'd become accustomed to on the court. And so you develop as a human being during that time. And so for Aly Khalifa, to see his development just off the court and how important he's been to the team while having never suited up for the team, while having never played a second of basketball, and to see that he finally had that moment, it's really special. And then you see guys like, there's obviously others. Rakeem Buckles comes to mind. There's obviously tons on the football side, but you think about, the most impactful probably that comes to mind for sure is Luke Hancock, who led Louisville to a national championship. And I'm not saying that that's a promise from Aly Khalifa or anything like that, but I'm saying that those guys can all speak to the fact that they had to go through the emotional trials and tribulations of being a true sit-out transfer. This is a guy that did things the right way, and he's being rewarded for it. Kudos to the NCAA. Good on everybody that was involved in making the decision, and good on Louisville for holding them to their word that he's going to get to play this season. Couldn't ask for anything better. Alan, let's go enjoy our weekends, and everyone listening, let's get on to the podcast. Until 502 Podcast.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Starting 502 Podcast. I am your new host, Jay Cook, and I am joined by Alan Thomas. And today we are without Presley Meyer, without Jacob Lane, so we will see how well we can keep this show on the rails without our usual host. Alan, how are you doing today? I know you and Prez just recorded recently, but we do have some brand new interesting topics to talk about in this episode.
We do. I'm doing great, man, and it's this is the first time you and I get to kind of go at this together. So I'm really excited about it. Like you said, man, we have a lot to tackle, and we have some very, very big news that just dropped today that we need to get to.
Yes, absolutely. But before we get to that, we'll drop the socials, because if I don't do it right now, I will forget to do it entirely. So we'll start with Alan. If you want to follow him on Twitter, it is card, N_AL. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am UofL_updates. And for all things Louisville related, you can follow at State of Lou. That'll get you our podcast, Pink Seats. Every podcast that we do here at the State of Louisville, you'll find it right there. You'll find some clips and links to get to it. But today, exciting news came out that Louisville has added now a 10th non-conference opponent. And after seeing the first 9, you might think, hey, let's take it light here. Let's play Buffalo. Let's play Wright State. But no, the cards did not go that way. Alan, let the people know exactly what just happened today.
Yeah, so today the news came down just a couple hours ago that Louisville had added another non-conference game against Baylor, which is technically a neutral game site in Fort Worth, in the Dickies Arena. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think it may be sponsored by Dickies, or maybe that's a name. I don't know how they do things out there. So I just kind of looked at it. I've never heard of this place, but it is about an hour or two, if I'm not mistaken, from Waco, which is in the middle of nowhere. If you've never traveled through Texas, it is you won't even know you're there until you see the Baylor football stadium on the plains in the middle of Texas. But this is not where that is, but it's definitely a lot closer to Waco than Louisville is, probably by about maybe 12 hours or something like that. But it's they host like like rodeos, and there's like concerts. Like I saw Brandy and Ray J are going there in like a week or something like that. Just like it's that kind of venue, and it's Dallas, so like it may not be the biggest arena in Dallas or in the Dallas area. And I know folks out there actually like they really like to nitpick you if you say Fort Worth is Dallas or vice versa. Like they're very, people that, especially the old timers, that didn't grow up in this merger era, kind of like the people out in, I guess J-Town or Prospect that are now, part of, Jefferson County here in the Louisville merger when that happened in like 2000 or 2002, whatever. But yeah, it's crazy. It's for me, it feels a little personal, just stemming from what happened with Scott Drew and the hiring process, and not really against Scott Drew or against Baylor. Like, we don't really care. It's just that Louisville fans thought we were getting Scott Drew. So I think their fans, the Baylor fans, just retaliated on social media, and it just became one of those very nasty, like, week-long things where they're like, he's not coming. And we're like, we heard he's, he knows this person that knows this person. And it just kind of got messy for a little bit. So there was just a lot of shots back and forth. Man, what are your takes on this thing? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm excited. So I went to TCU for my last 2.5 years of college.
Oh,
so
that's
I'm
cool.
very familiar with Fort Worth and the Dickies Arena. It is downtown Fort Worth. It's probably an hour from Baylor. So like an hour drive from Waco, and it's just I-35W, easy drive. So, and Louisville to Fort Worth is probably 14 hours plus. So
wow, yeah.
Definitely going to be expecting a much more favorable crowd for Baylor than Louisville. But I'm excited. We don't really have any history with Baylor at all. I think we've only ever played them one time. And I'm sure most people remember it was that Battle for Atlantis game, 2016. And if I remember it correctly, we were up a bunch, right? And then Baylor just came storming back at the end and barely beat us.
Yeah, we were up by 20 twice in that game.
Yep.
Once in the first half was when it was like a Thanksgiving thing. It might have been on Thanksgiving because I remember seeing a lot of my family, and I watched it with my granddad and everybody else. But in the second half, we went back up 20. We're up like, I don't even know, 10 at halftime or something. Went back up 20 in the second half, and from what I remember, it just all came crumbling down in about 10 minutes. In 10 minutes of game time, and it just all unraveled. And one of those stunners, that they talk about in our folklore that we love.
That and the Duke game from that next year, or maybe not next year, was it 2019, so 3 years after that, are like the two games that just haunt me to my core when it comes to just games you feel like you're cruising on, and next thing you know, you're done. You're like, and you just, after the game's over, you just sit there and you're like, what the hell just happened here? But this year's game, going to be interesting. A little bit of a rivalry since we had Scott Drew, didn't have Scott Drew. We thought Scott Drew's wife loved Norton Commons. I guess she didn't enough. But this Baylor team does not really look at all like last year's Baylor team. I remember in May, an article came out that I read that they had lost every single player on last year's team due to the transfer portal or graduating. I don't know if some of those guys ended up transferring back to Baylor, but what are you seeing with this matchup against Baylor?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what you said. I think I love to rival with fans of other fan bases. Kind of keep it like nice and clean for the most part. Maybe a few jabs in there, but it's interesting to me because one of the things about Baylor and Baylor fans, when Scott Drew was supposedly talking to Josh Hurd or thinking about coming here, so we heard or whatever. One of the things that stuck out was how many Baylor fans were like, "We don't need NIL. This is a culture thing." Like, this is Baylor. So like all of a sudden they beat us one time. They have one title. And it may have been the COVID title, and we're not going to go that. I mean, it still counts, right? But like, you're not an elite program, in my opinion. And this is not me trying to be mean to Baylor or anything, but like, I'm just like, where do you get off? And then, like you're saying, the entire team turned over. So they had to. It's either, and I'm not saying it's because of NIL that they lost people. I'm saying you had to come up with some scratch to put this roster together. And I'm going to space the one kid, the 5-star that they got, Yusuf.
Tundo Yesufu.
Yeah, yes.
He's so good. He's so good.
Yeah, and so I think if you're Scott Drew, and we love Scott Drew, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like he's an enemy, but fan base versus fan base, that has turned into a nice rivalry just based on rumors. So I think it's just so fun, and I'm really looking at like this one. It just, for whatever reason, just feels a little bit personal. After all, that's kind of like one of those like, hey PK, can you show like that you are the better coach? I mean, if that's possible. And like I said, like, you could name 5 coaches in college basketball, maybe, that are better than Scott Drew, like better, in the big scheme of things. But I think a lot of people would agree that he's one of the best in the game, just from a personal standpoint, how he puts players in the league. And, just his approach to everything, to life in general. He's kind of like the Dan McDonnell in a way, except Dan doesn't have a title of college basketball. And like, that's his approach to everything. He's not like gonna, scream in a kid's face, and he gets, it's just, he rolls the red carpet in the heartstrings type of way to get players. So anyway, I think it's interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really glad that it's late in the season because I think it's a cluster of non-con and a lot of difficulty, even before the new year, and as the new year just turns into the conference play. So I'm glad that we get this one late in the season.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I'm glad that it's later on, kind of in February, as opposed to stacked up with all those other non-conference games that we have in late
Mm-hmm.
November, early December. So I like it, and I think you're right too. I think this will. I mean, if we lose to Baylor, it's a random non-conference game in February. Grand scheme of things, probably won't matter that much. But if we win, I think that kind of gives Louisville fans a little bit of a morale boost, saying like, you know what, Scott Drew may have been the one guy we wanted, but we ended up with a better coach.
Yeah.
And I think we already kind of think that already after 1 year with Pat Kelsey, but beating him in that year two would definitely go a long way. Just before we get off Baylor, they lost everybody. Rob Wright, Norchad O'Meara, VJ Edgecombe, Jeremy Roach, Jaden Nunn, they're all gone. And their transfer portal class, 22nd in the nation. And they brought in Tunde Yesufu, who's a 5-star, who's really good. But this team certainly lacks the talent that they did last year. And last year they were disappointing already. Maybe it was too many mouths to feed, only one ball to go around. But
Sure.
I think Louisville certainly has more talent than Baylor does at this point in the year.
And it's just funny. Like we both of us referenced the stacking of the non-conference games together, and I mean you have several others that we could go over and talk about, just like the levels of difficulty. I don't even know how you would rank them really. I think Kentucky would have to be up there. You would assume Arkansas would have to be up there. I know nothing about these teams, and I'm not going to say preseason this or that. Just like I'm saying, on paper, you have the exhibition game against Kansas that we barely touched on in the podcast that Presley and I did. Just so many different matchups to talk about now. And I think this Baylor one is like a wild card with all those. Because I think, and like I said, we can touch on each one. But you have the Indianas, the Kansases, those are kind of like the if you count Indiana anymore, kind of like the blue blood Kentucky, the blue blood areas of who we're bringing in. Baylor is more of one of the newer brands, kind of like Oregon football in a way, except again, Oregon hasn't won a title, but it's just kind of like the up and coming kid that it's like, okay, this is, it's going to be a showcase. And anyway, I'm just really glad that they were able to sprinkle in some of these games for whether it's nostalgia or status or, just a tribute to an old rivalry or two. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I'm excited now as we started at the bottom of our non-conference schedule. February 14th is that game against Baylor. So I'm sure wives and girlfriends, if you're listening, you are thrilled to hear that you'll be spending your night at Buffalo Wild Wings watching Louisville versus Baylor on Valentine's Day. But now let's shift up back to the top of the non-conference schedule. The Louisville has filled out 10 of their 13 non-conference opponents. This one doesn't count as one of the 10, but Kansas in an exhibition game. We've touched on it a little bit. It's just an exhibition, so we won't spend too much time, but
Sure.
This one will be at home, I think, on October 24th, 2 weeks before the Kentucky game. I know I'm going to overreact to whatever happens, but in the back of my mind, if we lose, I'll say, oh yeah, well, Indiana beat Tennessee last year, 66-62 in an exhibition, and look how that turned out.
Right.
But I will say one thing I'm excited about is with Kentucky being so early in the schedule, I think it is huge that we are playing a team like Kansas that early on, as opposed to it being a Valparaiso and a Sacramento State, and just teams that don't get you fully prepared and ready for what that moment is going to be like against Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think we've all been talking about it and thinking it as we see the Baylor game come out finally. Is we're like, if anything that Josh Hurd and Pat Kelsey have done in this offseason, it has been like they have gone, and it's almost like they are hearing the cries of the fan base, whether it's, hey man, we got to beef up this schedule, even if we go whatever 22-12 or 22-11. Not saying we will. I mean, I think this team is pretty stacked, and I'm not going to make a prediction right now, but let's beef up this schedule, whether it's non-conference. Is that the only way we can beef it up, since you guys don't really, are not giving any flowers to the ACC anymore? And maybe rightfully so. I think it'll be a little beefier this year than it was last year, the ACC. But I think they listened. I think the Kentucky game's a little early for my liking. I am one of those people that kind of like the New Year thing. Around the New Year's, I would like to see that move a little bit later in the season. It always feels like we're not ready for them for this weird reason. It always feels like they are clicking, whether it's Pope or Kelsey or whether it was Patino or whoever is coaching them. They are clicking at that time. So yeah, but this Kentucky game, like you said, stacked up with the Kansas game, even if it's an exhibition, that's a team that, having Kansas in town, it's going to be on TV. It's going to be, heavily wagered, a lot of eyes on that game, a lot of, how did that work out for you kind of thing. And I can't remember what the game was where Arkansas played. I forget who they played last year, but it was like a preseason game.
They played
I think it was
Baylor,
Kansas. Was
or
it
was it
Baylor?
Kansas?
It was one of these. Anyway, it was a preseason, like one of these charity things, I guess.
Hmm.
And Arkansas ended up winning by 10, and it may have been Kansas actually. And now I
Hmm.
think about it, and maybe I'm tripping, but like they ended up winning, and we all some of the people that were like, yeah, well, like they didn't overreact, but I think like in the back of our minds we're like, I'm gonna put a pin there because
Hmm.
that might seem important later on in the year. And I may have put a pin, I don't remember, but I've forgotten about that game in specific because come March, I did not expect them to roll like they did, Arkansas. So like these games, they can mean something. If you treat it like a tournament game and go out there, I really don't want Pat Kelsey to. Just my old man takes over when I think about this game being an exhibition. But I'm like, you don't have to win this game, Pat. But I think you do have to have a good showing, and we want to showcase our best against Kansas's best. At the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm hoping. I think we've talked about it on a previous episode. I think we had some issues with it airing, so I don't think anyone's ever heard this, but we talked about it. I want this home and home exhibition in Louisville this year, in Lawrence next year. I want that to
Mm,
turn into a every year regular season thing. Like, could you imagine if we tried to compete with the Champions Classic, but it's all Adidas teams and it's
yeah,
Louisville versus Kansas and it's Texas Tech versus Indiana, and you flip flop. We play Tech, they play Indiana. Like, I can't seem to understand why Adidas wouldn't want to showcase. I mean, it doesn't have to be Texas Tech and Indiana. It could be any other Adidas school, but like, why you wouldn't want to showcase your big brands? Because Duke and who is it? Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State, and who's the other team that rotates in that Champions
is it
Classic?
Kansas? Isn't it
Is it
Kansas?
Kansas? It might be
That's
Kansas, so we might have an issue there, actually. I
maybe.
think you're right. I think it is Kansas, but just something like that where Adidas gets to showcase their four best teams and
Hmm.
they rotate every year. I think that would be so cool. So hoping this is the start of something that in the future will be even cooler. But now let's move on. We talked about Kentucky a little bit. I don't want to talk a ton about it. We're going to have so much time between now and November 11th to discuss
Oh
the
yeah,
game. Really, no point in late June to bring it up. Only
sure.
weird thing I saw. That's the first time we've played the game in November since 1993. It's just so weird to me. But after that game, we play in a multi-team event, and we're going to go to Cincinnati. That's considered a neutral site game, but it's in Cincinnati. We're going to play Cincinnati, Eastern Michigan, and NJIT, New Jersey Institute of
Hmm.
Technology. So I think that tells us that we're not going to go play in the Battle for Atlantis. We're not going to go play in the Bahamas, the
Hmm.
Bahamar, or anything like that. So what are your feelings? Maybe not as much on the opponents, but just on still doing something around the Thanksgiving break, but not being this loaded, 4 games, 4 days, 4 top 25 teams that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a good question because part of me and I feel like on every podcast I say at some point like how superstitious and like paranoid I am when it comes to Louisville sports, but like I 100% feel that whether it's sleeping super far away or whether it was the rest with that tournament and the high level of competition that we saw uh, in the Bahamas last year. But that case and prior injury happened there. That's where it occurred, and like so to not do that again. Part of this is part of my brain that just kind of is like, phew, takes a sigh of relief. But you mentioned the Cincinnati game and also that Cincinnati that miniature that event is going to be pretty cool, and I really hope to go to that Cincinnati game, even though it's a neutral once again a neutral game at the Heritage Center, and that's actually that place has some history to it. That is where, and not to be a Debbie Downer, but that's where the Who back in the '70s they played a show, and there's like a big stampede, and like a bunch of the concert goers got like crushed to death.
Oh,
So
wow.
like that was like huge news for like 2 or 3 years where people wouldn't like big bands like the Who wouldn't play smaller venues. They wanted to play outside and stuff like that. So, but
Mhm.
we won't go down that road. We also play Indiana in Gamebridge, which is a neutral site. So like I just think it's funny that we play three of these neutral games, but and then by the same token, Memphis comes to town. They play in Freedom Hall, which is a or no, I'm sorry, that's next year. Cincinnati is Freedom Hall, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's a neutral, but not really. So it's just kind of all these like tongue in cheek neutral games are pretty funny to me. You know, so but Cincinnati is one that I've kind of bookmarked. I've told my wife about it. I've told a couple of my old buddies. I'm like, we really need to hit this one because this one hits you right in the feels. And every Louisville fan, no matter what age, knows how much we hate Cincinnati through and through. Not just Cincinnati, but Memphis and a couple of those older metro schools. Every time we play Florida State, I think about it. I think about how much we used to hate them back in the day. So just glad these are back, and I am trying my damnedest to get up there to Cincinnati for that event.
Tell your wife it's either Fort Worth on Valentine's Day or it's Cincinnati on I think it's November 21st or 22nd or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell her it's one of those two. It should be an easy decision for her.
Yeah, them's the rules. Them's the rules.
Did you know the Louisville and Cincinnati is Louisville's most played opponent of all time?
I would have bet either them or Memphis for sure. Yeah.
Yep. We've played them 100 times exactly, and we've played Memphis 90 times. So, but we haven't played them since 2022. We played them in the Maui and got smacked. We don't have to talk about it. Yep. But before we get off, Cincinnati actually does bring back a few players. They've got Jizzle James and Day Thomas. For anybody that watched Cincinnati last year, 2 undersized guards, averaged 10 points per game. Mm-hmm. They also brought in Kirk Kriisa, who Louisville fans will be familiar with a little bit. I imagine he'll play a similar role he did at Kentucky, a bench guard, energy, defense, facilitating. And then they also, a few months back, I know Baba Miller was a hot name in the streets for Louisville fans. He obviously did not come to Louisville. He ended up going to Cincinnati. So I'm sure Cards fans that are more in the weeds like we are, it's going to be another name that they remember. So it'll be an interesting team. Again, not overly talented Cincinnati team. They've yet to make the tournament. I don't see this as a team that makes the tournament either. But like you said, I'm just excited to have the rivalries renewed with them, with Memphis, seeing Indiana more often. It's very, very fun to me. As we move on down the calendar, now we're into the very beginning of December. Mm-hmm. We are back in the ACC SEC Challenge. We did not finish last in the conference, so we get back into it. And we got a really good matchup against Arkansas. Yeah. And Arkansas is like basically every John Calipari team that he's had since 2008, basically, where they are super talented. They're ranked by a lot of places in the top 10 and these 2 early top 25s. Mm-hmm. Lost a lot of dudes, lost Boogie Flan, John L. Davis, Adu Thiero, Jonas Adu, but they've got a ton of talent coming in. A lot of those are freshmen. Darius Acuff, who is the only other player in this class that can really truly say, I might be better than Michael Brown. I don't think he is, but he at least is in the conversation. They've also got Carter Knox coming back, DJ Wagner coming back, Trayvon Brazile. So they've got a ton of talent. That one is going to be in Fayetteville. So a really, really interesting and difficult game. Hoping we have better luck against the SEC this year than we did last year.
Yeah. If you asked me, and I was just thinking about this going through as you and I were talking about this, thinking about the ones that I worry about the most. And I was like, I'm just going to let the worry come to me naturally. Like the anxiety just wash over me. This one really, really makes me anxious. And not just because it's in Fayetteville. Believe it or not, John Calipari and I am like, it's like that swords, the meme with the guy with all the swords, say something about basketball, he's got all the swords on him. But like my thing is that John Calipari is really a great basketball coach. I think he knows ball. I think he knows he has, we saw it this past year, everybody saw he just rolls the ball out there. And then what was it Kentucky fans were saying was that, the game passed him up a little bit. He's still dribble drive. Well, he's getting players that can dribble drive still. He still has shooters. He can still get to the rack. These guys know how to get fouled. And none of that comes, unnaturally. And another reason why it's so anxious is the obvious one, the pink elephant in the room named Kenny Payne. Is that like
don't call out Kenny the Jet Smith?
Yeah, no, not Kenny Smith. I'll have at least one screw up where I'm like, confused. Presley would be like last podcast, Presley was like, you don't mean All American, you mean All ACC. I'm like, yes, All ACC, yes. So Kenny Payne. Another thing about him is he just might be a really great assistant. He might be a whisperer. He just may not be ready for the limelight ever. I'm not sure if he's ever going to be ready for the big job again. He's getting up there too a little bit. But this is one that, like the one game that stuck out last year where I was like, well, we never had a shot there. Honestly, wasn't Tennessee. It was Ole Miss. That game, I went to it with a shout out Spencer Brown. We were up there, and within like about 30 seconds, I was like, nope, we're not going to be able to hang with these guys. They were just way too physical, way too athletic, way too smart away from the ball. And to be honest with you, Arkansas is very well they were last year. They're very well coached away from the ball. Honestly, very disciplined and a very tough team. And we have struggled against tough teams. Now, I expect this roster is going to be a lot more talented than what we, shout out to last year's team, but more talented than last year's team. And I think they'll be able to go toe to toe. And I don't think you're going to get out talented. I just think we need to show up. If we're going to get this done, we need to show up with our boxing gloves on, and it's going to be a slugfest. It's going to be loud. They're going to be rude. Anyway, I'm a little anxious about it, though. I will say that.
I think that's a great point, though. We saw in the non-conference just how much we struggled with Tennessee, with Ole Miss, with those really just hyper-aggressive teams, even Oklahoma a little bit, that were just in your face, probably had better athletes than we did, and were just going to outmuscle you. And those were games that we always struggled with, and we continue to struggle with even once we got into the NCAA tournament. So I think you're right. This is a great measuring stick to see, like, okay, even if we lose, but if it's a competitive game, if we lose by 5-6 points at Arkansas, I'm fine with that. I would take that as still not a victory, but a moral victory. You know that you're not losing by 20 to Ole Miss, 20 to Tennessee like we saw last year. And we're really, like you said, you could tell within the first 5 minutes of the game that we're not on the same level yet from a physicality, from an athleticism, from a talent standpoint. We just were not there yet. I think we were well coached, just as well coached as they were, but like you said, physicality just wasn't there. So I think you're right. I think it'll be very interesting to see how Louisville does against an SEC team with the kind of talent Arkansas has. We're now going later into December. My dog won't stop playing with her loudest toy that she has. It's really fun. So
it's okay. We love dogs. Yeah.
Sorry.
But we barely heard it. It didn't come over on my earpiece here. So yeah.
Okay. Well, good. We now move on to Indiana. Very similar to Baylor, brand new team, but also a new coach this time. They got Darian DeVries. Yes. He spent 1 year at West Virginia. Did his son Tucker decide to sit out the last part of the year so that he could get another year and play for his dad at Indiana? Who knows? I'm not here to say that. But he's got Tucker DeVries back. He's got 10 players from the portal. A couple guys that people might know. Lamar Wilkerson, I know Louisville was interested in. Shooter from – where did he play at? Conference USA team. They're orange. They're the Bearcats, but I can't think of what they're called. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Was the UTSA kid? Was that it?
No, I don't think. Sam Houston State.
Okay.
That's where
one
he played
Texas
at.
Schools, yeah.
Yeah, so he averaged 20 points per game, shot 45% from three last year. So great shooter, and that's really what Darian DeVries has done with his team, is just loaded it up with shooters all over the board. So interested in that one. Definitely not going to be the Indiana team that we saw last year that was really, really talented, but really wasn't that well coached. I think it'll be probably a little less athleticism, a little less talent, but much better coached.
Yeah. We faced, West Virginia last year, and I remember that being a really good matchup, not just because, it's easy to say because the score at the end was close. I just remember a back and forth, Louisville had to take command of – it was really Chucky Hepburn had to take command of that game.
It was Chucky versus Javon.
Yeah, and it was just like the one thing about the DeVries, his kid can shoot it. Like you're saying, it's going to be a different look. Indiana. I don't expect a 30-point game or whatever like we saw last year, 25. But I think with his teams again, you get well coached, scrappy defenders, that are going to make you work and purposefully wear you out. Not the most physical team we saw by any stretch, but he's going to have them, space the floor nicely. And Pat Kelsey has teams that like to space the floor and run the floor. I welcome that with open arms rather than a team that wants to muck it up and go to war with you. Now, again, different roster for us too. For the majority, we have some tough guys. I'm not saying that we're not tough, but those are the teams that when you saw them on paper, okay, this team likes to run. I felt good about about going up and down the floor against teams like that over, some of the more brutes that we face like Tennessee and Ole Miss and teams like that.
Yeah, and before we move on to Indiana, that is another one of those that we talked about, neutral site game. It's in Indianapolis. Going to be probably a 2-3 hour drive for Louisville fans, depending on where you're at in the state. Going to be
Game Ridge.
Going to be a huge NBA arena, which will be very cool. I have a feeling that will sell out as well. Move on.
That arena is. I don't know if you've ever been to a Pacers game. I've been to one, but it was like it has all the feels of just walking in. it's like an old school, like, you feel like you're in literally an Indiana field house. Like,
Mhm.
it lives up to the name. Anyway, go for it. I can't wait till that one.
Yeah, no, I've been to Gainbridge one time, just like you saw the Pacers play the Celtics like 2 or 3 years ago. It's a really
Yeah.
nice arena, and it definitely
Hmm.
has that feel of an NBA arena. So I'm excited to see how
Hmm.
that goes. Next one, December 13th, so just a week later, a Saturday game. The Cards will play at home, one of the few at home, or not neutral site, one of the few at home non-conference games the Cards actually have on the schedule
Hmm.
against Memphis State. Like we said earlier, this is a very familiar foe. Cardinals have played them 90 times so far, but it's been nearly 10 years. It's been 8 years since we last saw them. The Cards did sign a 6-year series with Memphis. So this, unlike some of these other ones where it's 1 year, it's 2 years, it's home and home, whatever it is, we're going to see Memphis on the schedule until 2031 at the very least.
Yeah, Memphis State. Yeah, bring it on. This game falls on my birthday.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's kind of one of those. I mean, I get to do whatever I want that day, so I might go down there, or I might just watch it surrounded by a bunch of stuff, food that I love, and just stuff my face and scream at the TV. But this is definitely one that every age of Louisville, once again, every age of Louisville fan is going to want to see, and happy that this is coming back full swing. It's going to be interesting as we get closer to this game, because we have so many non-cons stacked up, like next to each other. And it's like it's like your head spinning with all, like, it's not like you're saying, you're not playing Southern Western Tech or whatever, and then you
Mm-hmm.
jump to Memphis State or whatever, and I'm just going to keep calling them Memphis State. And then the
They
next one,
like it when you do that.
yeah, and then the next game is against like red, green, blue academy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
these are, a lot of these are stacked up and tapered in a way that we can't overlook anything. And it's like we're gonna have to keep the fire. The team's gonna have to keep interest and just stay locked in. But as far as Memphis, Memphis State, as far as they go, you've got Penny Hardaway. You still have a lot of influence. I'm not sure if they're going to just hang on to him or what at this point. I think it kind of feels like an experiment that they're like willing to go one more year, kind of like Hubert in a way in North
Mm-hmm.
Carolina, where they're like, this is our guy. We have to make this work. And I get all that. But I also think Louisville is kind of the example of, sometimes you have to cut ties, even if it hurts, like,
Mm-hmm.
parts of the fan base. So, um, this is stacked right in the middle of all of it, and it just depends on what our record is, and like if we have any injury situations, how good I'll feel about this game moving in. But right now, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is probably, of all the non-conference games outside of like the two that are in that multi-team event in JIT and Eastern Michigan, but like the really big dogs, I probably feel the best about this one. It's at home. Memphis is kind of similar to Calipari,
Hmm.
always got a ton of talent, and they never really seem to quite live up to the talent they have. This Memphis team is not nearly as talented, in my opinion, as they have been in the past. They lost Dane Danger. They lost PJ Haggerty to the transfer portal. Those were two of their best players last year. They did bring in Aaron Bradshaw, who's been a disappointment since he's came to college basketball.
Man,
Doug McDaniel, who was like a really inefficient, undersized guard at K-State. And then Sincere Parker, if you ever watched that McNeese State team, he was one of their better players. He was their
yeah.
best player off the bench.
Hmm.
So some talent, but I mean, really, like you're not seeing the 5-star recruits landing there. You're not seeing these huge transfer portal splashes like you've seen in the past. And
Yeah.
what we've seen with Penny is that he typically does less with the talent that he has. And I don't think this is, compared to the other Memphis teams he's had, a very talented Memphis team. So I think this is probably the one I feel the best about. Still wouldn't guarantee a win, but of all the tough opponents we have, it's probably the one I feel the best about. Last game we have to talk about, December 16th. So as of right now, our last non-conference game before we get into the ACC, but we don't know exactly when ACC play will start, so they could slide in another one. But it is our return game, Tuesday, December 16th, to Tennessee.
Hmm.
So we will go to Knoxville. They came to Louisville last year. Remember the game, not very fondly, kind of whooped the shit out of us. This
Yeah.
year, this Tennessee team, no Zakai Ziegler, no Chaz Lanier, no Igor Milicic, no Darlinston Dubar. A lot of guys they've lost. They do
Hmm.
bring back, what's his name? Felix Okpara, the really big, lengthy center, blocks a lot of shots. Also brought in Jacoby Gillespie from Maryland, who was one of the top transfers. But again, this is another team that lost a lot, and I don't think quite brought back as much talent as they lost.
Yeah, this will be the third SEC team in our non-conference schedule. Again, we had that last year too, and struck out last year. So I think this year, like if you're looking at this game, and looking at Arkansas, and you get Kentucky at home, I think it'd be really, really like so nice to get 2 out of 3.
Agreed.
If we're talking just, I mean, I was just going down the list of like, taking out Kansas because that's the exhibition. You don't have to win that one, obviously.
Yeah.
But 2 out of 3 of those, you get one Big Ten team. It's Indiana. It's a first year coach. I hope, hope we can, snag that one, even if it is, in their turf specifically. And then 2, or one Big 12 team, 2 if you include Kansas. Just talking about the bigger teams that we're facing. No shade, maybe a little bit of shade on Kansas and Memphis State, but really no shade on the conferences and things like that. But well, then you have Cincinnati as a Big 12 team too. So that's why I put 2 here. But again, like 1 out of 2 of those Big 12 teams, preferably, don't screw up Cincinnati. But I'm just going down. I was going down the non-con earlier, and I'm like, you kind of have to. It'd be nice to win more than half because you're putting these teams on your schedule to prove a point. It's like you're not just going to go play them. These aren't like pay games, where you're like a lesser team that's coming in to get their ass destroyed. This is one of those where like you have to have a good showing. And again, Pat Kelsey put the pressure on himself. All the respect in the world to him and Josh Hurd for going out and hearing the battle cries of the fan base and just, I'm sure of their own circles where they're like, okay. I mean, because Pat Kelsey was notably like, an 8, like on that video when they got the 8, like they were all surprised and he was like looking around like an 8. So I can't believe we're an 8 seed, maybe they deserved more, but then, they got blown out in the first round too. So it's kind of one of those, did you just get a tough draw? Was Creighton just like our worst nightmare in the NCAA, the worst matchup imaginable where, a team that just shoots the lights out. So this is your opportunity, to put on your big boy boots and go into some of these places that you've never been before and play teams that, Pat Kelsey has never played before. A lot of these guys haven't seen before, and understand that it means more to play some of these teams. So you're going to have to, really, grease up your elbows, against Memphis and Cincinnati and Indiana, because those W's are going to mean a lot here. So anyway, 3 SEC teams is kind of, needs to be maybe the standard moving forward of what we put on the schedule, especially if it helps our seed down the road.
Absolutely, I agree. We also have, we didn't mention them, Ohio somewhere on this non-conference schedule. As far as I'm aware, there's no date set, and nor do I know much about Ohio basketball. So didn't really feel like we needed to talk about it much. But as we talked about it, 10 games, I'll go over them one more time, not in any order, but Ohio, Baylor, or I think it should be home Ohio, neutral Baylor, away Tennessee, home Memphis, neutral Indiana, but it's in Indianapolis, Arkansas on the road. That one's going to be in Fayetteville. Then we've got that multi-team event where we'll play 3 games in in Cincinnati. It'll be Cincy, NJIT, and then Eastern Michigan. And then we've also got Kentucky at home. So 10 games right there. After that 10-game run, we're about to get into ACC play. We'll also have 3 more that we add, but we don't know those yet. What is a record that you are happy with? Because you've got NJIT, Eastern Michigan, and Ohio that you're assuming are wins. So we'll say those are 3-0. Of the 7 other games, how do you want to see us play to where you're like, okay, I feel good going into ACC play?
Yeah. So if we, again, like Arkansas gives me, definitely anxious vibes. If we lost that one, I would be really beside myself because it's Calipari again. It's Kenny Payne. I understand all that, but I think in the big scheme of things, like that's the best, that's the team that worries me the most out of all these teams. So I don't think, seeding wise, it would hurt you that much. And I think, I'll say this. I think I'd feel pretty good about out of those teams, those games. I'd feel pretty good about even getting more than half, like a 4-3, 5-2. I'd feel pretty good. What about
That's
you?
where I'm sitting. That's where I'm sitting as well. I'm looking. I think Baylor neutral, likely a win, but I could see a loss. Tennessee away, though the talent isn't as much. It's still in Knoxville, so I'd lean that one more a loss. So say we're 1-1. Memphis at home, I feel good about it. Say 2-1. Indiana, feel good about it. 3-1. Arkansas, a little scared about. I'm going to say 3-2 on the road. Really talented team. And then we've got Memphis. I feel pretty good about. Or no, we already said Memphis. Sorry, Cincinnati. Feel good about 4-2. And then that Kentucky game, I think we win, but again, it'll be tough. So yeah, I think 5-2, I'm feeling great. I'm riding high.
Mm-hmm.
4-3, I'm still happy with it. I'm content with that record. Anything worse than that means we probably took a surprising loss to a Cincinnati or an Indiana or an Ohio or a Memphis or something like that.
Yeah.
And that would definitely not be the greatest. Last thing before we get out of here, Al, we talked about 10 games. What is the game you are most looking forward to? Doesn't have to be the most competitive, but just the team that you are most excited to see opposite of the court to the Cardinals this year.
Gosh, that's a great question. I think the natural answer is Arkansas, just because Kenny Payne. You have Kenny Payne and Calipari on the opposite. So like that one, I'm gonna have butterflies that day. But I think like maybe it's just the washed individual in me. I really, really can't wait to play Cincinnati. Like in that setting in the Heritage Center, it's not their traditional setting, but that is a historic place that's been there for a long, long time. And I actually might be there. I might make a special trip. That's the one I've kind of circled on my calendar. Like it just kind of sits by itself. From the other ones. The other ones I have like you said, there's Valentine's Day. There's November 11th is just in my head for Kentucky, and then you have my birthday for the Memphis State game. But for whatever reason, like I think it would just be so cool and nostalgic and fun to play Cincinnati in the Heritage Center, which is right on the river, right there in the downtown, that cool downtown area. Get you a little hotel. Just walk everywhere. Park the car. Just walk everywhere. Walk to or maybe head down to over the Rhine. You know what I mean? Like Cincinnati's that area right there is just so cool, and I think that's the one I'm looking. My watch self is looking forward to the most.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Arkansas is the natural one that I'm leaning to. Just probably top 2 most talented team will play, a return to go play and hopefully beat Kenny Payne. But I'm going to throw a wild card. I'm going to say Baylor, kind of more where it's at in the schedule. February 14th, we've gone through a majority of our ACC schedule. And if that lines up, we've played Boston College, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, just kind of these lower level or predicted lower level ACC teams in a row. And then you see Baylor on the schedule, neutral site Baylor, that can bump us from a 4 seed to a 3 seed, something like that. I think that will be very exciting. Again, a little bit of a comeuppance against, good Lord, I just forgot his name, Scott Drew. That, hey, you chose wrong. You should have came to Louisville, but instead we got the better coach. So I think that's a wild card that'll be really fun to watch. And I also love that Tunde Yesufu kid, the 5-star that Baylor has. I think he's incredible. I don't know if you've seen him at all. He borderline cosplays Anthony Edwards. Like he wears the same sweatbands, the same leg sleeve, wears Lord. 5, but plays like him too. So if you ever get a chance, go watch him. He's really, really impressive.
So he's like the
McDonald's.
So he's like the Raiola kid from Nebraska that cosplayed Patrick Mahomes.
But more talented. I think more talented.
Yeah.
I think Yesufu.
Yeah,
I think Yesufu will be a lottery pick. He's crazy athletic, crazy strong. But yeah, kind of just funny. You literally watch him and he's dressing like him, wearing the same number. So it's a natural connection, but he does play a little bit like Anthony Edwards. So I'm really excited for that game. But all in all, I'm just pumped that the Cards have decided to load up on the non-conference. I think we learned from last year that I don't even think we had a bad non-conference last year. I mean, we played Tennessee, we played Ole Miss, we played Kentucky, we played Arkansas, we played West Virginia, we played Indiana. That's a pretty, it's not as good as this year. That's a solid non-conference, and it didn't matter. Even with 27 wins that we had, 28 wins that we had, it still wasn't good enough. We still got an 8 seed. So I think Pat Kelsey, Josh Hurts saw that and said, fuck that. We will not let you dictate our seed. No matter, you are going to see who we play. We're going to beat good enough teams where you can't deny us a top 4 seed, a top 3 seed.
Yeah, I love it. And like you're saying, you have to, like I was saying a minute ago, you got to put your big boy pants on if you're going to do that. And I think as a fan base, we saw last year, we saw the style, we saw the recruiting, we saw the transfers he's brought in, and we're all like, well, bring it on, buddy. If we're who else we're going to schedule? I think after the initial because we started the transfer portal hit pretty hard. Mind you, Michael Brown Jr. was early January when we got him, but when the transfer portal opened, and we just kind of got, it was Conwell, Woolley, McNeely right off the bat, and I think we were all just okay, we're serious now. We mean business, and I'm excited to watch it all go down, and I'm excited to rub elbows with these big schools and just be respected again, on the national front. I think last year people got a taste of it, the nation, but a lot of people still kind of overlooked Louisville, and I think this year is going to be a totally different story. I think we're stacked.
100% agree. Definitely feel good about If we didn't have the roster that we had, maybe I'd be a little bit concerned about this much talent
Yeah.
that we're having to play against. But with the talent that Pat Kelsey's brought in, I'm not concerned at all. Other good thing, I'm pretty sure every single one of these, as far as I'm aware, is a home and home, at least 1-1, besides Arkansas. But we'll have another SEC opponent in that challenge. So this will look pretty similar next year as well. But we will get out of here. I'm going to remember to plug us one more time. I am Jay Cook. You can find me on Twitter at UofL_updates. This is Alan Thomas. Find him on Twitter at cardin_AL. And then if you want to find anything, all things State of Louisville, you can find us on Twitter, I think on Instagram as well, at State of Lou. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you here shortly.